today we will be taking a deep dive into Revit Phases. And I don't know how familiar you are with Revit Phases. Maybe you have already worked with it quite a lot, but we use Revit Phases to give a time aspect to elements and also views in your Revit model, and also as a means, as a way to simplify the creation of these when you're working with a phased project. Then just a quick introduction of myself. For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Anine Nota, and I'm a BIM specialist here at Baker Baines in the ASC build space. I'm also a professional architect, and I worked in industry for a couple of years. And at Baker Baines, I'm also a Revit trainer and on other BIM software as well. And I also assist companies with BIM implementation. Great. So looking at our agenda for today, we will start with some basics on phases. That is, what is it, how it's typically used, and so forth. Then we will look at the phasing workflows. That is how your phases are set up and how you apply these to views and model elements. Then we will look at phase filters in more detail. That is what it is and how it's used in your Revit project. We will also look at graphic overrides as another tool to control the graphics of your project phases. And then I'll also show you a new update of Revit 2022, which is the ability to use filters for phases. And that's also another means of controlling your graphic presentation for phases. Lastly, I will give you some tips and tricks for phases. Okay, so I just want to mention as well that for those of you who would like to watch some of our previous webinars or events, recordings of all of these are available on our YouTube channel. So you can go there and look at our library. And also, if you want, you can subscribe, and in that way you can keep track of our weekly webinars. Then I would like to just give you a quick overview of who Baker Baines is and what we do. So besides us being an Autodesk reseller, we've also evolved as a niche consulting company that offers a variety of consulting services. These include business process improvement consulting, survey and design hardware consulting, design software consulting, topped off with a blended learning approach, which is how we believe our customers can or should digest information. So our main intention with this really is to assist our customers with problem solving and also designing and making a better world. This is just to give you an overview of our various product offerings. Something, for instance, like the scan to BIM services using TopCon and Leica technology is becoming an increasingly viable tool in industry. Then before I start my presentation, I would just like to get a feel of where you guys are at with your skill on phases. So I'm going to launch a quick poll. And when you see it on the screen, you can just start entering your answers. So I'm just going to launch it quickly. Okay, so the question is, how would you describe your skill level with Revit Phases? Either you are a beginner, or perhaps you've got a good understanding, but you can probably learn more, or maybe you are a master at Revit Phases. So I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to start entering your answers. Okay, so I see that the majority is more towards number 2, which you have a good understanding, but you can learn more. Great. And then the rest is more beginner. So we don't have any masters on Revit Phases here today. I just want to check the, okay. I'm just going to close it quickly. Great. Good. So starting off with some basics on phases and just some concepts around it. First of all, what is Revit Phases? Now, one thing that I want to highlight and which is important to understand is that demo is not a phase, but it's rather an action taking place inside of a phase. Now, this is something that a lot of us make the mistake to misinterpret, and I will get back to demolition a bit later on, but remember this. So when do we typically use Revit Phases? Either on renovation projects, if we've got multiple phases on complex projects, we can use it for that. And then also another instance where Revit Phases comes into play is during the construction phase, where temporary structures needs to be put up by the contractor to secure the site, and also for the protection of the building occupants or visitors to a site. We will look at these shortly. So also then, why do we use Revit Phases? Now, for those of you who were used to working in AutoCAD, you are used to the more manual way and sketching all of your lines and fills and colors to show your different phases. Now, instead of doing this, if you use Revit Phases, it really just automates this entire process and helps you produce a correct graphic representation much more easily. It will also ensure that when you make any modifications on a building, that it's communicated accurately, and also that it's scheduled correctly according to the correct phases. So really, it just takes away all of the manual workflow when you are working with phases. Then just looking at the workflow when we are setting up phases. So I'm basically going to just mention the steps now, and then I'm going to go through each in more detail. So first of all, obviously you need to create your phases, and you do so from your Manage tab and the phasing panel. For those of you who've already worked with phases, you will know that there are two default phases, which is existing and none, and they are automatically created. Then once your phases have been set up, you need to create or set your views a phase. And then after that, you will need to assign your elements to a specific phase. Now, if we look at creating phases, just what the workflow looks like, you will go to your Manage tab, to the phasing panel. You will click on that phases icon, and this will open up your phasing dialog box. At the top of this box, you will see three tabs, which is project phases, phase filters, and also graphic overrides. Then, as I've mentioned, if you use a standard or a default Revit template, you will typically have your two phases automatically created. And then if we just have a look at the type of phases that we use according to the type of project that we are working on. If we are working on refurbishments and additions, normally 2 phases is enough. So the default ones is more than sufficient. Like I've mentioned, don't make the mistake of creating a demolished phase. It's not. So phases represent an action. In other words, a wall is created in the existing phase and or demolished in new. Then if we are working with multiple projects or multi-phase projects, in other words, it's large projects with multiple phases in terms of the construction sequence, you can add as many phases as you need, and you can call in something like phase 1, 2, 3, or 4, or you can give it more descriptive terms if necessary. Also then in terms of a description for each phase, you can be, it helps being specific. For instance, saying that which portion of the building or a wing are you referring to, that just makes it more easy to recognize. And then very important when you are working with multi-phases is to pay attention to the sequence in which you are adding them. So in other words, your first phase needs to be closest to past at the top, and then your latest or current phase needs to be closer to future at the bottom. The reason I'm saying this is because once you've added phases, you can't rearrange or delete them. So be careful when you do the setup that you add them correctly. So you will typically do this if you've started with phase 1, you will, on the insert tab to the right, you will say select after. In that way, it will make sure you are adding it in the right sequence. So this is just to take note once again, like I said, you can't rearrange the order. What you can, however, do, if you need to get rid of a phase or to get rid of it basically, is that you can bind it with another phase, or you can reassign elements to another phase. So in other words, when you're combining another phase with, say for instance, a previous phase, it will delete the phase that you have selected, and it will add or reassign the elements that existed on that phase that is going to be deleted to the phase you are combining it with. I will show it to you in a demo a bit later on. Just to show you what it looks like if you want to add more phases. So from your Manage tab, you will go to your phasing panel. And from this dialog box, we can see the two existing default options. And you can simply go double click on it and start renaming it. So yeah, I'm renaming it to phase 1. And you also then add your description. Same thing for the second one. Add a description once again. And then, like I said, pay attention to your sequence. So they are selected after to make sure that the next one is added after and not before phase 2. Okay, so that's just showing you the sequence once again. And once this is done, you can select apply and OK. And that's it for adding your phases. Then just to show you what it works like if you want to combine a phase, or in other words, get rid of one, you can see here there's no option to delete or to reorder them. So say, for instance, I want to combine phase, or let's rather take phase 4, for instance. Let's start from the bottom, combine it with the previous phase. You will see that phase 4 is then deleted, and all those elements that were on that phase will be reassigned to phase 3. Same applies if you want to do the same with phase 3. Then I'm looking at phase properties. Now, you've got various properties in terms of phases for both views and elements. Starting with your views, you will see that if you go to the properties palette of a view, if you scroll down to the phasing parameter, there is both a phase property and also a phase filter property. Now, the phase property, basically, we use that to indicate the phase to which the view is currently assigned. Also note that all your views must have a phase assigned to them. And when you create a new element, it automatically assumes the phase of the view that it was created in. So in other words, if the phase is set to new and you start adding or creating new elements, they will automatically pick up the phase that is set in your view. Then your phase filter property is a means of controlling how your elements will display in that view, and it relates to the phase property of that view. Then looking at the phase properties for elements, now each element that you model or add to your building has a phase created as well as a phase demolished property. Now, if an element isn't marked for demolition, the phase demolished property is set to none. Looking at your phase created property, it identifies the phase in which the element was added to the building model. The default value for this property, like I've mentioned, is the same as the phase value of the current view. And that is just to show it to you next to each other. The bottom one is the elements properties, and the top one is the view's properties. Then if we look at the phase demolished property, it identifies the phase in which the element will be demolished. The default value is none, but you can also change that status if needed. If you want to, for instance, demolish an element, you need to change the status of that to a phase that is after the phase it was created in. So for instance, looking at this image, in other words, straightforward phase demolished, if it was created in new, there's no other phase later than new. So if you set it to new, it will create a temporary element, and that is something that I will show to you a bit later on. But just talking about demolishing elements, so how do we do that? There's two ways. The first option is a hammer tool that you find in your modify tab in your ribbon, going to the geometry panel. And then the second option is a more manual way. It's simply by changing the phase demolished status of an element in the properties palette. So this is just a quick demo of the properties of phases. So currently I'm on my ground floor view, and I'm going to start with the properties of this view. So we can see that there's the phase filter and a phase, and there's also a drop down with various options for phase filters. We will look at that a bit later. And then your phase, currently it's set to none, but you can also change that to a different phase. Now, if you had multiple phases set, it would have displayed in that drop down as well. If we zoom into this corner, we can see the elements display as gray, and that suggests that it's an existing element. And we can also see that the phase demolished is set to none. In other words, this element was created in the phase before the current phase. So that's just to show you from your demolished, you also have the option to change the status of that as well. Say for instance, I go and I create a new wall. This is just to showcase that this wall that is created in this phase relates to the phase property of the view. Same for any other element that you add. Here I'm adding a door, and the same applies to that. Okay, so that wall, which is a new wall, currently displays without a color fill, but I will get back to that later. If we go to this portion and we just want to see how it works to demolish something, this is using the hammer tool and simply clicking on the element that I want to demolish. And then the other option is to change the status. So remember, it should be to a phase later than the phase created. And there we can see it displays as demolished. So next I want to talk about the graphic display and the options of that in terms of phases. So first of all, if we talk about phase filters, what is it? It's basically a means of setting, or it's basically how you decide to view the elements in your views relative to the phases. So if we look at this image, for instance, there we can see the phase filter is set to show all. In other words, it shows all elements across all phases and they have different colors assigned to them. So this is what your phase filter is used for. There are two places that we make use of phase filters. So the first is inside of your view in the properties palette, and then the second place is in the phase dialog box, the second tab, which is your phase filters. Then also a phase filter is simply a rule that you apply to control the display of elements based on their phase status. In other words, if the element is existing, it has a certain filter assigned to it. The same applies for the others as well, like demolished, new, and temporary. Then just note that phasing does not apply to legends or is applicable to sheets, although it does affect the views that are placed on sheets. And then lastly, as for schedules, you do have a simplified phase filter that you can use, and this just allows you to quantify elements which are created during a certain phase. Then if we go to the phasing dialog box and we look at the phase filters tab, you will see that there are 7 default filters that are created automatically, and they will be applied to the current view or to the current phase of the view that you are in. So for each of these also you have 3 options. So you've got by category, overridden, and not displayed. And if we go back to the filter types, looking at the first option, which is show all, that means if that filter is applied, it will show all elements that have been created up to the current phase, and also all work that are created during the current phase. If you look at show complete, that means it will show the results of the current phase. In other words, it's something like an as-built. It will show all of the work once completed. So if we look, for instance, at the last 2 columns, the demolished and temporary, and looking at the options which is set to not displayed, in other words, once the work is done, that is work that has been completed, so that is why it will typically be hidden. Then the next one is show demo and new. In other words, it will only show the elements that are set to be demolished, and then new elements that are to be added to the current phase. Show new is obviously, like the name says, it will only show elements that are added to the building model during the current phase. Then you'll show previous and demo. It will show elements that were created in the previous phase, in other words, existing, and then also work or elements that are set to be demolished in the current phase. Then show previous and new, same thing, but the difference is it will show existing and any new work that are to be done. And the last option is to show the previous phase, which will only display elements created during the previous phase. In other words, all existing works that are there at the start of the current phase. Okay, so that is just showing you where the phase filter is applied once again. And if you set it to none, it means that you don't apply a filter to a view, obviously, and that will result in multiple objects coexisting in one place. So just keep that in mind. Then if you need to, for some reason, create a new phase filter over and above the default ones that exist, you can easily do so from this phasing dialog box. And also then just looking at the 4 columns, they represent the 4 phase statuses, which is your new, existing, demolished, and temporary. Then for each of these 4 statuses, like I've mentioned, you can or specify how the elements are displayed. So by category, what that means is elements will display according to the project-wide settings of which are applied to them in the object styles, or as per any other applied overrides. Then the overridden option, that will display elements like they are specified in the graphics override tab, which is the next tab. And then obviously not display means that elements are hidden. Looking at the graphic overrides, so in other words, if your elements are set to be overridden, they will display according to the overrides that are set in this tab. So currently on the screen, we can see the 4 phase statuses, and they then have options of setting various patterns and lines, etc. And just bear in mind that these filters are set globally, in other words, project-wide, so they are not set view by view or according to individual elements. So if you apply a graphic override, it will be applied across your model. And then also the options that you see available on this dialog is more or less similar to those that you see in your visibility graphic overrides that you have for any view. And also, if you look at the last column, you will see material. So you also have the option of defining a material override for elements. Just note that this only applies to views that are set, of which the visual style are set either to shaded or consistent colors. So this is just a demo to explain or help you understand the phase filters a bit better. So currently I'm on ground floor and my phase filter is set to show all. If I change it to show completed, you can see the graphics looks different. It looks more like an as-built. For instance, don't see any demolished work. If I go to demo and new, it will only display new and demolished work. Show new, only new work. We zoom out a bit. So those are all new elements. Previous and demo. Then the next one is previous and new. So according to what you need to display in your view or communicate on your drawing, that is then how you will apply your phase filter. Okay, so I'm just switching it back to, let's say, rather to show all. And then what I want to show you is if we go to phases and we go to the phase filters again, looking at show all, we can see that that option is grayed out. So if we look at the first column, which for new, the option by default is set to by category. In other words, all new elements that I add will take on the object style that was applied for it in the project-wide settings. If I look at the other columns, the existing, demolished, and temporary, they have overrides set for them. I just want to show you an example. If I go and add a new wall of another type, and it's also set to the new phase, I can see that it adds a red fill for that. Now, why is that? I'm just going to pause that. Like you would have remembered that as I showed you in the phases, in the phase filters for show all, these elements are set to by category. And because this wall in its type properties has been set with this red fill, that's why it will display in like this in show all. Also, if I set it to show complete, it does the same thing, and that's because of the option that is selected by category. So if I, for instance, go and change it to overridden, and I go to my graphic overrides, now this is just to show you the colors that are assigned. This then will apply that red fill to all new elements. Okay, so that is just show all that changes it back again. And this is just to show you where it comes from. This wall type's material has been set with the red fill, whereas this one does not have any fill. So an option that you can do to get around this is that you might want to add materials for new elements and then for existing elements, so that if you need to use the show all filter, that you are able to manipulate or specify how you want these elements to display. Then just looking at graphic overrides. So currently the filter is on show complete. So for instance, if I change it to previous and demo, looking at the filter, it's set to overridden, and now I'm going to change the graphic override for these elements. So I'm adding very random colors and lines. for demolished, also another color. Good. And when I apply it, you will see that because this phase filter is set to overridden for demolished and also for existing elements, it will take on that override. My OCD is just taking or getting the better of me because new elements are red, so I'm just quickly changing the color here. And then also what I want to show you is that the override property of materials. So I'm going to draw in a section to show that to you. If I go to that view, so currently it's only the graphic overrides for the phases that are displaying. Now, if I go back to my graphic overrides and I go to material, I can click on the 3 dots, and from here I can assign a different color to the shading. Now, just note that this is the color, in other words, that will display on a view when it's set to shading or consistent colors. And you might want to make use of this if you, for instance, want to make demolished elements appear more transparent or something like that. So yeah, I'm just changing the visual style, and there you can see this override is applied. I have tried this option on plan, but for some reason it doesn't work. So it does work for 3D views, elevations, and sections. But if you're working on a plan, it actually takes on the phases coloring or overrides. Then just to look at what filters should you use with which plan. So if you are creating an existing plan, your phase filter you need to set to complete, and then your phase will be set to existing. If you're working or creating a demolition plan, your phase filter will be set to show previous and demo, and your phase will be set to new. And then if you need to create a new plan, your phase filter will be on show previous and new, and obviously your phase will be set to new. Then something I spoke about earlier is creating your temporary elements. That are things like maybe fencing that has to be put up during construction, or lightweight walls to close off parts of the building for protection. Then you can use temporary structures for that. So just to show it to you, say for instance, I need to close off this portion of the building and also that side. So what I can do is I can go ahead and use whatever wall I need to, and draw in a wall over here and another wall over here. That is just changing the justification of that wall. Okay, so currently, because the view's phase is set to new, it displays as with the override of new, or rather with the by category. But if I change the phase of it to new as well, we can see it changed to a blue dashed line, and that is because of the override. If I want it to stand out a bit more, I can also add fill to it. So that's just what I'm doing there. And just to show to you of the phase filters, because it's on overridden, it will take on that override. Okay, so that is what you can do. Also, remember that it's a project-wide function if you set overrides. So going to 3D, that graphic override would have been applied there as well. Then say for instance, you need to create a custom filter. So with this example, looking at the ones that we have available, if I set it to show complete, I can't see my temporary works. If you want to show your work that has been completed as well as the temporary work, once again, you can create a custom filter. So you simply click on new, give it a specific name. I'm calling it show complete and temporary. Choose your options for display. So here I'm setting the new and existing to my category, demolished to not display and temp to be overridden. And going back to my view, if I now change my filter, I can see my temporary works. Okay, so that is it for creating your custom filters. Then just some tips and tricks for working with phases, or some things to take note of. One, a nice functionality when you are working with renovation projects is that you can sort your views in your project browser according to phases. So if you want to do this, you will simply right click on views. Then you will go to browser organization. And from here, we can currently see that the option that is selected is all. And looking at our project browser, it, in other words, shows all of our views. So if we want to organize it according to phases, we will select the phase option. And then we will select edit, which will take us into our browser organization properties. Then from the grouping and the sorting tab, you will, for group by, you will sort it by phase. And if we select this option, notice the change in your project browser, it will sort your views according to the phases that exist in your project. You might, however, feel that if you are working with demolition drawings as well, that this option, sorting it according to phases, does not include the demolition option. So for that reason, you can change your group by to rather sort it by the phase filter. And this is then what it would do. It will sort it according to the phase filters that you've created. Say, for instance, you want these phase filters to read something like complete, existing, and new, instead of show complete, show demo, new, etc. You can just go and change the name of the phase filter in your phase dialog box. Then also to take note of is that rooms are only visible in a single phase. So rooms does sometimes, or actually all the time, they behave quite strangely when working with phases. So in other words, they will only display in the phase that they were created in. So if I'm working in an existing phase and I'm adding rooms, the rooms will be visible. When I, however, change the phase of that same view to new, you won't be able to see the rooms. Okay, so rooms, you can't change your room phases once it has been created. And sorry for that. And also rooms can't be demolished. So say for instance, you need to show your existing rooms in a new plan, then there are three options. Option one may be something like creating a text tag. So this is just a quick fix, and you can use it for small projects, but I won't recommend it using it on larger or complex projects. Then another option is to create a view that only contains your view tags from your existing rooms, and then you simply overlay it to the new floor plan view on your sheet. This, however, is not very clean, but it does work. The last option is to copy your rooms from your existing plan over to your new plan and paste it with the Align to View option. However, the problem that you have with this is that it creates a double number of rooms in your project. And also demolished walls can also mess with your room boundary. So just keep this in mind. Then looking at groups and phases. So if you have groups, just remember that they don't have phases. It's only the elements inside of the groups that has phases. So if you have a group that contains elements, and say, for instance, you want to copy that group, it will lose its phase information. So just to show you an example, here is an existing wall and a door which has been added to a group, and their phase has been set to be demolished. And now if I go ahead and I copy this group, I can see that the phase will change to new. Just checking the element, I can see, yes, it has been changed to new. So also if I go and change the phase filter to show complete, it will only show new elements. So just keep that in mind about groups. Then demolishing a finish. So sometimes when working on renovation projects, you frequently need to only remove or demolish the finish of a wall and keep the rest of the wall elements, something like this. Now, if you need to do this, actually the best way of doing it is to model two separate walls, and then your one wall is the finish, which you can see on the screen is the blue, it's the outside, and then the other wall is the wall onto which the finish is applied. You will then go and set your exterior wall to be demolished, something like that. And if we look at the properties, your finished wall will be phase created as existing, phase demolished new, and your wall that is kept will have its phase demolished on none. So if we have a look at what it looks like in your demolition plan, it will look something like this, whereas in your new plan it will display correctly without that finish. Then if you are working with linked Revit files that also have phases, it's important to map your phases correctly. So here we've got two Revit links, and to map it correctly, you will select your link, and then you will select edit type, and then from your phase mapping, the option you would select edit, and then it will show you your phases in both your host model and also the phases from the link. So important here is to check that your phases are the same in terms of the amounts, and also that their naming are the same. So really avoid having differences in the number of phases between one Revit file and another Revit file. Then, like I've mentioned, is a new Revit update in Revit 2022, which is the ability to create filters according to phases. So you can set it, you can apply these for phase created and phase demolished elements. Like I've mentioned, when working on multi-phase projects, it doesn't automatically create a color for each phase. So it will only apply the graphic overrides that were set for the 4 default phase statuses. So as a workaround, I'm going to show you how you can use this phase filters if you need to distinguish between the various phases. So here I'm on my level 0, and looking at the view properties, I've got no filter applied, and the phases on phase 1. And I've created 4 building blocks, of which I'm going to assign each to a different phase. Okay, so if I go to phases, here I've created 4 different phases, and I've also created a custom phase filter, and I've set all of them to be overridden. Then in terms of the graphic overrides, this is what will be applied to the project phases if I have it on, if I apply that custom filter that I set up. So first of all, I'm going to ensure that all my elements are added to the correct phase. So the second one I'm adding to phase 2, the third one to phase 3, and then the last one to phase 4. Okay, so currently it's on, it hasn't got a filter. Then using my custom filter, let's just see what it looks like if I change between the different phases. You can see that it applies the existing and the new graphic override. Now, if I wanted to give it different colors to what you can see here, I can go to my visibility graphics and go to the filters tab, and here I've already created 4 filters for each phase. And from here, I have the option of adding various overrides to them. Now, say for instance, you wanted to add another filter, you will need to set a phase for that first. So I'm just going to show that to you. So if we go back to phases, from here, you will add your phase 5 after phase 4. Remember that. Going back to my filters, then I will go to edit and new. And from here, I will create a new filter. This is phase 5, and then I need to specify the categories to which I want to apply this filter. So in this example, I'm applying it to walls and doors. And if we scroll down, you can see this is the new update, which is I can apply to phase created, and equals phase 5. In other words, all walls created on phase 5 will have that filter. And that is just showing you how to add it, but I'm not going to do it now. So working with these 4 filters, I'm just changing the patterns and colors. Just giving each a different one. Okay, so once this is done and I apply it, we can see in my view now each phase has a different color. Just note that this is a view specific setting. In other words, if I go to my 3D view, it won't apply it, and I can also see that the filters doesn't exist in this view. But what you can, however, do is to create a view template with this filter that you can apply for various views. And that brings us to the end of our session. So I would just like to end off with a quick summary and just some thoughts to take away from today. Remember, demo is not a phase. It's actually an action taking place inside of a phase. And then each view has a phase. And always make sure that you set your views phase correctly before you start modeling to ensure that your elements are added to the correct phase. Remember, elements added in a view takes on the value of the view's phase. And then what are your phase filters? They control the graphic display of elements relative to the phases. And lastly, graphic overrides are lines, colors, and patterns assigned to elements if the filter is set to overridden. And I would like to give an opportunity for questions if there are any. So if you do have a question, please post it in the chat box or the question box. Okay, I don't see anything yet. I hope that after today you feel that you are more towards the mastering of Revit phases as opposed to in the middle. But if you do have any questions, let me just check once again. Nothing. If you do have any questions or can think of something after today's session, please feel free to reach out to me and I will help you with that. And okay, I was just having one last look. Okay, then if there's no questions, I'm going to just wrap up. And just in terms of how we as Baker Baines can help you, first of all, if you want to know more about Revit or other Revit topics, you've got the option of booking for one of our standard Revit training courses or refresher training, and we will show you all the ropes. Or if you need any advanced training on more on selected or project-specific Revit topics, you can also book one of our specialist series or even a request for customized Revit training. And then lastly, say for instance, you need some help with your BIM standards in your office and also on projects, you can reach out to us to talk about helping you with your BIM execution plan. Then just in terms of our consulting methodology, which is called I Adopt, this is what we use to help our clients develop and also implement digital strategies and transformation. We also, with this tool, we help you optimize your business processes and workflows, adopt technology, or in other words, to help you design and make a better world. And then just looking at some of the benefits of this, it really focuses on solving your problems, delivering tangible outcomes, looking at issues in a holistic approach. Some people think of us as just the Autodesk resellers or Revit trainers. We are much more than that. So it's way more than just the CAD environment. And also, we assist you if there needs to be change in your organization. We help you manage that. Then lastly, I would like to encourage you to go and look at our online platforms if you're not familiar with that, our social media. Also, like I said, our YouTube channel is quite nice to look at some of our other webinars or events as well. And then if you need any support, our support desk are open on weekdays from 8 to 11:30, and our contact details are on the screen, or you can just Google us. And on that note, it brings us to the end of our session, and I would really like to thank all of you for attending today, and I wish you all a wonderful weekend and have a good rest.